Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, but it's not just me, it's also my partner in crime, John.
Are we criminals now?
We are, because we're talking about Grand Theft Auto.
Oh.
Which is a crime. And also a game series.
You shouldn't do it.
Yes.
Shouldn't do it in real life.
No,
Don't do
absolutely. No, crimes are bad. They get you in the criminal places. Anyway, so, very recently, Grand Theft Auto... What's the actual full title? I'm going to get this right. Because
it's Grand Theft Auto, the Trilogy, the Definitive Edition.
Yeah, it's a bit of a long-winded name. It was very recently released on all current platforms, so Xbox Series X, PS5, and Switch. Was it released for PS4 and Xbox One, John?
Yeah, PS4, Xbox One, and PC.
Oh, yes, of course, good old PC. Polite compliment.
Yeah, that's what it stands for.
Yes.
Not many people know that.
So it's been released, and let's not beat around the bush. It's not great. It's not great. I'm not super familiar with this trilogy of games. I've played 4 a lot and 5 a lot in my time, but I didn't have a PS2 growing up, so I'm not super familiar with these games. But John, you did.
Yeah. When I was a kid, my mum wouldn't let me play these games, but I went back to them after GTA 4. And I also experienced them a bit around my friends' houses. So I do definitely have a lot of memories and nostalgia for Vice City in particular, but I've played through all of them. And I feel like they're definitely janky in their own way. Like, the original versions are definitely dated in some respects. But 3 also pioneered the whole open world genre. Without 3, we wouldn't have games the way they are today. And so when you go back, very few elements, like the core elements, are actually dated. It's more just how it goes about them. And I feel like this compilation had the opportunity not only to put them in the best light they could, but also the opportunity to refine them. And all it really does is add the weapon wheel from GTA 5 in terms of gameplay. That's basically the only difference. They said they'll have GTA 5 style aiming. It really doesn't. It really doesn't. It feels like they have the cursor, but it feels exactly like it did on PlayStation 2.
I was about to say, I've, as I said, not familiar with the games on their original platform, but I'm familiar with GTA 5, and the aiming is just like third-person aiming with some auto-aim. I think it's a little bit sort of heavy-handed compared to first-person shooters, but considering that's not the main focus of the game, that's understandable. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and yet on this, it locks on. Immediate, it just logs onto your target. You don't have to try at all, which understandable for the older days. Certainly in a game where shooting isn't the main focus, you need to sort of it helps to streamline things. But these days, the Grand Theft, as you say, GTA 5 has much more sort of standard shooting mechanics. They said it was going to be in it. And it's not. It just logs onto them in all the games because I've tried all of them, and I didn't even know they said that the GTA 5 aiming was going to be in there.
Yeah, and this is the game's. This is a small problem in the overall package, really. But GTA, in terms of re-releases, they have struggled quite a lot in the past. They've done mobile versions of 3, Vice City, and San Andreas, which all have problems, and then they took the mobile version of San Andreas and ported it to 360, where those problems
didn't
remain.
they? Yeah. That was a weird porting choice.
Exactly, and so it's so strange that these games that hold so much historical value and helped make Rockstar into what they are today are always treated so weirdly. And this was the chance to not only refine them, but also just give them a nice facelift. And even if we ignore all the issues, I think these just look really, really ugly.
Yeah, I mean, the initial trailers they released, I think were very cherry-picked. Because there are the main character of 3, don't know his name, and the main character of Vice City, don't know his name. They look like they're going for a more sort of stylized angle, and I think overall it generally works. I think CJ's been done a bit dirty. He's the only one I know the name of because I've been playing San Andreas more than the others because it's more interesting to me. But yeah, CJ doesn't look like he's had quite the same care and attention, or maybe it just, it hasn't worked as well. I don't know. But then almost every other NPC in the game looks awful.
Yeah.
It just, I mean, there are some exceptions, but a lot of the time they just appear to have had almost like an algorithm has like upscaled them or improved the polygon count or something, and it hasn't worked.
It's a very strange divide between updating and trying to respect the legacy of what they had in the past. Because all the models are still all blocky. They all look like they come from the PlayStation 2 era, but they're smothered in modern effects that make them look really strange. Like we've all seen, like, oh, it's X game in Unreal Engine 4. Like, oh, this is Ocarina of Time in Unreal Engine 4, and they always look really, really weird. Like you have these older models, and they're lit with very strange lighting that they were never intended for. This looks like that a lot of the time. But then they have actually gone and updated a lot of elements too. Like if you look at the backgrounds of a house scene, for instance, the wallpaper is entirely new. Like they've gone and like retextured everything in there. So there's definitely areas where it looks way better. But then there's areas, like as a whole, I think the overall art style just doesn't make sense. It's very incohesive. Like sometimes it's trying to look like a PlayStation 2 game, but at the same time it's trying to look like a modern game, and I just don't think it pulls it off.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned Ocarina of Time, actually, for a number of reasons, one of which we'll get onto later, but you know, Ocarina of Time 3D, I think, was a brilliant example of how they took the spirit and the art style of an original game, and admittedly only bringing it up to 3DS level, so it wasn't like a massive leap, but it still kept the same feel, but it felt like almost like a brand new game. Like the models, the animations, they were all updated and updated accordingly. And so I think it actually, you know, sort of you... Generally, when I remember, like, the N64 Zelda games, mainly Majora's Mask, I think of the 3DS versions, and I look at the originals and I go, oh yeah, bloody hell, that's what it looked like.
They were updating them to the artwork, like the manuals. If you look at Ocarina of Time N64's manual, Young Link there looks like Young Link on the 3DS. It was a great update. This looks more like, you know in Wind Waker HD, when you go up to a candle or a flame, the illusion of cell shading kind of breaks. Link looks a bit clay-like. That's what the entire game of GTA looks like. It looks like something has just gone a bit wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's circumstances where it's more than that, though. Like I've been playing San Andreas on Series X, like the best possible representation of that. And it's very messy. And we'll talk more about the Switch, but on Series X, it runs at 4K 60 FPS, or it's meant to. But when you get into combat, suddenly the frame rate, like, halves. It goes way down to, like, 30 or 40. And this... it's Unreal Engine 4. It's meant to be demanding, of course. That's understandable. But at its roots, it is a PlayStation 2 game. We're running off the same scope of a game that came out, like, 20 years ago. And to be on these groundbreaking machines and for it to barely run is... astonishing. It's astonishingly poor.
I was wondering what word you were going to use then. It's because as you said, we're mainly going to focus on the Switch version, but really for, you know, sort of a modern system like the Series X, like that thing is hellishly powerful. And I know porting is not a science, it's an art, but there should not be any issues. It should be able to run a double. Arguably, it should be able to run at, you know, God knows how many frames a second. Because at its core, it is as you say, it is a 20-year-old game. Is it 20 years, John? Is it actually 20 years?
God, I think GTA 3 was like 2001. So yeah.
God.
For some of them, 20 years.
It's honestly baffling in so many different ways. But let's move back over to the Switch version, because... you know, this is an issue on all platforms, but I think actually on the Switch is nowhere near as bad, is the draw distance. The draw distance is massive, which initially sounds like, oh, that's a good thing. And this is an issue that was also with Nintendo Switch Online, Nintendo 64, or whatever the hell that's called. I think it's complicated titles that may... give an issue with fog. So the original games had a lot of fog to help with performance and to hide imperfections at, you know, sort of greater range, lower poly models, things like that. That has all been stripped away here, and as a result, you see an incredible amount of pop-in, and things just look flat and weird.
Very, very artificial. Yeah. If you're high up somewhere, like not even in a plane, if you're on a high ground in a car, you can see everything, and it looks so weird. It looks like you're looking at a Gary's Mod map. It just doesn't look good. And then when you're in a plane, everything is so unlit and flat. Like you can just see everything in this pure grey texture, and it doesn't look appealing.
Yeah, it's, if anything, as I mentioned earlier, it's a little bit better on the Switch just because the game is... This is another issue. The game is incredibly soft. I don't know what resolution it's running at, but it ain't good. Let's put it that way. And so as a result, it actually looks marginally less weird on Switch. I wouldn't go so far as to say it looks better because the image is incredibly soft, but, you know, sort of it takes the edge off. And pop-in is also a major issue on Switch, but you were saying pop-in is an issue on Series X as well. The like kingpin of consoles right now has an issue with pop-in.
Yeah, there's some times where cars will just appear. One of my friends from Vux.net, he mentioned that he was going around a corner, and a car, literally, as he was going around the corner, crashed into him before the model loaded in. So an invisible car crashed into him.
I've had I've not had that on the Switch version, thankfully, but I have had Collision that's loaded in very clearly. Collision's there, but there's no model, and it didn't load in. It was in a clothes shop in San Andreas. I don't know whether that's because a model is missing or what, but there was no model there, and it's, you know, sort of maybe it would load in. Maybe it was just an error in loading, in which case, you know, these things happen, whatever. But I don't know if you know, if what you're saying is, you know, sort of things aren't loading in properly in time, even on the most powerful of systems. It kind of suggests that maybe there wasn't enough time for these ports, or there wasn't enough care or attention put into them, or whatever. The fact is that the end result is messy. For whatever the reason may be, the end result is messy.
Yeah. Rockstar outsourced these, so they didn't do them themselves. And when I heard Unreal Engine 4, I was already worried for Switch, because very few large-scale Unreal Engine 4 games run well. Like, we have examples like Octopath Traveler. That's, of course, 2D, it's very stylized. That looks great. But then you look like, even like Shin Megami Tensei 5, that's a good-looking game, but when you're playing in handheld, it does get a little bit blurry. And I think it's like 720p docked, so that's like I guess the least you should expect from a Switch game. This, though, I don't even want to guess what resolution it is, because it just looks so blurry. It looks comparable to PlayStation 2 in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I'm half tempted to try. They've got anti-aliasing on, and I think, if anything, it's a little bit too harsh. I noticed that there's, at times, there are some trails with objects that move quickly, and somebody pointed out on Twitter that that is an artifact of anti-aliasing, and it's an artifact of sort of, from what I could gather, slapdash anti-aliasing, just kind of like, you know, stick it on and, you know, jobs are good kind of thing. So there is definitely anti-aliasing going on here, because otherwise it would look really, I think, really low resolution. But the thing is, as a result, it looks low resolution and blurry. Like, when we had The Witcher 3, just a reminder, The Witcher 3 runs on this system and it looks better than this. The Witcher 3, when it was first released, it had this sort of blur and this sort of softening effect going on. And then they released an update where it allowed you to turn it off. And I personally think it looked a lot better with the sharper edges. Yeah, don't get me wrong. You know, the Switch version, it doesn't look amazing, but bear in mind this is running on a system that runs on 8 watts. This, you know, I don't want to compare to different titles too much because, you know, game development is an art. It's not fair to just do a side-by-side comparison a lot of the time. But my God, this is a 20, you know, one of these is a 20-year-old game. The others aren't shy of it. It should look and run better than this as well. Because also, there's massive frame drops on the Switch, and it's far more pronounced than it is on Series X. And the thing is, I wouldn't go so far as to say that the Switch version is unplayable, but my God, it's distracting. Some people may well find it is unplayable, but that's a lot of the time it's a personal thing.
Sure, yeah. I guess if you really want GTA on the go, like this is portable GTA 3, Vice City, San Andreas. Outside of mobile, we've never had that.
Yeah.
We haven't had GTA on Nintendo since Chinatown Wars. I just wish, though, that they would have included the original versions alongside these. And what really sucks is they've delisted every possible digital version of GTA prior to this to make room for this trilogy. So Steam no longer has the original Vice City or San Andreas or GTA 3. They re-released the PlayStation 2 versions on PS4. They're gone now. You can't get San Andreas 360 on Xbox anymore. You just have to get the trilogy. Which, just from a game preservation point or historical view, it just sucks. Like, even if these were great versions, that just sucks. And we shouldn't compare it to other Switch games, I agree, but I think we can compare it to the PS2 original.
Yes.
Which, it wasn't flawless, no, like, if you get into a firefight, yeah, the frames would drop. But I think it's more stable than Switch. And like you were saying with softening too, like the PlayStation 2 version, like, it's 480p. It's not going to look amazing. But if you have it like with an OSSC or a RetroTink or something that's going to give you the best picture quality possible, I think you're going to get way more respectable pixels. Like, the clarity, I think, looks better than what Switch offers in terms of its softness.
Yeah, and it's just such a shame because these are fantastic, as you mentioned earlier, incredibly important from a historical point of view games. And this isn't, you know, they keep calling this the definitive version. It's in the title. It's in the overly bloated title. And it's not. It's producing problems that the originals didn't have. And yeah, it's improving the visuals in some regards, but in other regards, the visuals are, you know, almost objectively worse. And I just think that is such a shame. It is such a pity that this is, you know, part of the problem. And we mentioned fog earlier. I'd like to come back to it briefly because, yeah, as we mentioned before, it's a problem with things like Nintendo 64, Nintendo Switch Online, and it's a problem here. But interestingly, I was playing around with cheat codes, and I turned on the foggy weather, and you know what? It still doesn't look good, but it definitely takes the edge off. And I showed you some screenshots, and it still doesn't look good, but it just looks way less artificial.
It's funny too, because these cheat codes were in the originals, but the effects were very different. So the fog was more like a smoke in San Andreas on PS2. It was more like there's just the smoky vapor everywhere. Whereas it looks more like there's an actual something masking what's in the distance on Switch. Which is a good thing, because there's popping all the time. Like, having something that makes it look less artificial, like, looks less like something that's just running on strings. It looks pretty good.
Yeah, and I'd also like to point out that, I think I activated another switch during the gameplay with the fog, so the cars were handling really weirdly, so they just kept flipping. That's why it's not that's not a problem with the game. That's not an issue with the game. I'm fairly certain I put in another cheat code and didn't pick the wrong one or something. So don't think that that's a problem with the game. Mechanically, the game seems to be generally fine. I have seen some weird pathfinding issues, but I'm not familiar with the originals enough to be able to say one way or another whether that's a problem. But I noticed a big line of cars near a Cluckin' Bell, just trying to go into a wall. I'd love to show you some footage, but it just happened last night when I wasn't hooked up to my capture card or anything. And the icing on the cake, you can't take video captures of this game. It's too demanding on Switch. They've disabled it.
Oh my god. Oh, you know what's kind of weird too is...
Oh, also, sorry, very quickly. The Switch fan runs really fast. Like, I'm on an OLED, so the fan is pretty damn quiet. It's running like it's, you know, you're in Korok Forest or something.
That's interesting. Like, since I got my OLED, I don't think that fan's really been tested at all. Like, my older Switch, the fan would be running playing Tetris. But with the OLED, it's been really quiet. So maybe this game could be a bit damaging if you played it in the long run.
I wouldn't necessarily go that far, but it's definitely, should we say unoptimized, to be generous?
I think that may be the term, yeah.
And it doesn't even look good, John. It's running the Switch this hard and it doesn't even look good. All right, well.
It's so weird that the sound effects are the exact same too, and that's one thing I always take issue with these, like with remasters like this. They go out of their way to update all the visuals, but then they have the exact same sound. So you've got something that looks like semi-modern, but it sounds like something from 20 years ago. The radio stations, yeah, some of them have changed because of licensing. That's kind of understandable, even though Rockstar have all the money in the world.
Yeah,
but
it's a shame, but you know, licensing is a difficult beast.
But when you punch someone, it just sounds like this slapstick comedy punch, and I guess that's kind of the vibe that they're going for. Like that's like the originals were kind of cartoony in a sense, but I just wish that they made them sound a bit more modern.
Yeah, it's like they don't quite know, because they've tried to go for a semi-stylized look on like the main characters, which is a look that overall I quite like. As I said before, I think CJ's been done a bit dirty. But the other two, I think they look like they've had some care and attention put into there. It's probably going to be a divisive issue, but I think it's okay. It's going for a style. But it's not reflected in everything else. The cars all look like they're trying to go realistic. They look like, to be honest, they look like the cars from GTA 4, from what I remember, but blockier. And so nothing really fits. And as you say, the sort of the cartoony punches and stuff like that, if they'd gone for a little bit more of a sort of a stylized cartoony aesthetic, I think that would work, and you'd be able to make it look like the PS2 originals, but you know, sort of look more modern, cleaner, slicker, all that sort of thing. But it's just confused, isn't it?
Yeah, all the guns sound like and that was fine on PlayStation 2. But they're clearly not trying to replicate the original style anymore, so I'm just confused why the audio is the exact same.
Yeah, although, I don't know whether it's an issue, but on San Andreas in particular, I didn't get it with the other two, but on San Andreas, the audio sounds incredibly compressed. But then, I swear last night, some lines of dialogue weren't incredibly compressed, and I don't know whether that's something that was in the original, you know, they had to compress things down and they, you know, use the original files, in which case, you know, okay, whatever. I just don't understand why it'd only be in one of the games, at least from what little I've played. But I'm sort of wondering whether maybe it's an error. Maybe there's an issue causing some crunch to the audio. In fact, I'm going to take just a few moments just to listen back to some audio now. Yeah, I've just listened to some more, and it was just like sort of inconsequential people swearing when car crashes happen. And it doesn't sound like super clear, but it sounds fine, and it's nothing like what I recorded yesterday. Really crunchy audio, so maybe that's an issue there as well.
Maybe. I guess this is also kind of a compliment for the game actually as well. Is on other consoles, it's like 50 gigabytes for the Trilogy. Whereas on Switch, I think it's like 24 for all the games, like 26 or something like that. But you can also download them all individually. So just in terms of storage, like that's pretty good. Like, that's a nice thing to have on the Switch.
Yeah, I think it's individual games to launch. It definitely is that, because that's what I've done. But I don't think you can purchase them separately. I could be wrong about that, but I swear I saw something when I was purchasing that said, not available for individual download or something like that. So you do have to buy all three, as far as I know.
Yeah, I think that's right. But it's strange that on Game Pass you only get San Andreas. On PS Now you only get GTA 3. So they do have them individually. I just don't know if they want to sell them to you individually.
Maybe they just want to be able to capitalize and be able to charge as much as they are, because it costs, what does this cost? It costs like £50. I don't know what it is in dollars. I know what it is in Australian dollars, because I got it from the Australian eShop on the hope I might get it early, and that did not come out.
I think it's £55 on the UK eShop.
So we've just checked, just to be sure, and it is £50 on the UK eShop, and it is $60 in the States. And I don't really want to get too hung up on value and charging and things like that, because that's oftentimes a personal thing. You know, if these are games that you grew up with and you love to death, you may well believe that it's worth that just to be able to play it on the Switch, and that's absolutely fine. But this is a full retail cost. You know, $60, £50 for 3 games from the past that have been, you know, updated, remastered. They're not remakes, they are just remasters. They're ports, essentially, enhanced ports. John, would you pay this?
If it were a respectable effort, I would. Yeah, I think £50 for 3 games, 3 very important and big games, I think is on paper that's a great deal. I paid £50 for 4 singular games, like Skyward Sword HD. I paid £50 for,
and
happily.
Probably a Tetris game, knowing you.
Probably. I think I might pay that around that much for Tetris Effect, the physical version. That made me like 35 or something. But that's not the point. I think, yeah, on paper, Vice City and San Andreas and GTA 3, I think they are worth £50. But not like this. Not like this at all.
Yeah, it's not running well enough on Switch in order for me personally to be able to think it's good. Before anyone, I'm sure some people have already gone down to the comments, but please do not take this as a formal review. We will have a formal review in a bit. This is just us initial first impressions, chatterooning. But yes, in its current state, it's not worth it. It's in this weird space where they've not improved it enough to make it worthwhile. From sort of a modern, updated, remastered point of view, and they've not kept it sort of close enough to the originals to make it a sort of, I wouldn't, want to pay the same price for just straight ports without any upgrades, for example. But it doesn't, sort of maybe if it was just the originals, but they ran beautifully, they ran just as you'd expect them. And, at 30, ideally 60 frames a second on Switch, but, just running perfectly well, maybe, but not like this. It's soft, it's low resolution, it doesn't run well, it has frame drops all the time, the artistic direction is confused, some of the models look really, really weird at times, like, I've forgotten his name, but one of these chaps just in these cutscenes, when he's on a bike, something's gone really wrong with his arm, and it looked really, really bizarre. And there's so many other instances available online that people have seen and shared of weird, like, model twisting and deformation, stuff like that. It's the same games at their core, and if you don't care about that sort of thing, there you go. It's there. It's available. But I just don't think it's good enough.
No. I think I'm done laughing at this game. I'm just disappointed by it now.
Yeah, it was funny at first, and now it's just it's just a bit sad.
Yeah.
Interestingly, if you turn on the Sandstorm cheat, you can make it look like GTA 4. Brown and foggy.
Just as I remember.
Right, well, there you have it. That is Grand Theft Auto... the Trilogy, the definitive versions or editions, whatever the hell they're calling it. Let us know your thoughts about it, whether you've played it, whether you've just seen the footage. Bear in mind, of course, any footage uploaded to YouTube and stuff like that will be compressed, but in reality, it's still pretty pants. And let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you hijack that subscribe button and drive around town? I don't know. And be sure to check out NintendoLive.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.
I'm on the eShop page right now, and it specifies Grand Theft Auto 5 style controls and targeting. That's like saying Animal Crossing has GTA 5 style controls because it has a wheel that you can select things with.
You're not wrong.